Okay, perfect. Okay, guys, Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. We stopped on this page last time to do with the microcosm. Um, Maybe with a little bit of himma and some determination. I'm hoping we can finish the introduction today, so that we can get to the meat of the text next time, inshallah. So I'll start by reading, and then someone else will pick up from the next section. Okay, so Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. So we talked about the macrocosm last time, unless I was mistaken. So now we're gonna get into the microcosm. Okay, all right. So far, we have been leaving human beings out of the picture because so far we've been describing the cosmos. Professor William Chick has been painting a picture of the cosmos. The reason should be obvious. They do not fit neatly into any of the categories discussed so far. Are they corporeal beings? Yes, but they also have a spiritual dimension. So if you remember last time, we talked about the nature of imagination and the fact that the cosmos represents imagination, its ontological status, its actual status in reality is that it is one of imagination. It is in between the realm of possibility and the realm of impossibility. That's the cosmos. It's also huwa lahu. It's God, but it's also not God. It's Him, but it's also not Him. So it combines all polarities, corporeality and spirituality, and so on. So human beings, are they corporeal? Yes, but they also have a spiritual dimension. Are they dense, dark, low? Yes, but also in their inward dimensions, at least potentially. They are also subtle, luminous, and high. In other words, human beings can be described by most, if not all, of the attributes that are attributed to the cosmos. Speaking about the general human situation, without reference to specific individuals, it can be said that human beings embrace a hierarchy of all things within existence, from the most luminous to the darkest. They were created from God's Spirit, breathed into the clay of this world. So they combine the most intense light of existence and awareness with the dullest and most inanimate dust of the universe. It's like very interesting how I think it's Neil deGrasse Tyson and other science popularizers and educators like to emphasize that we're made out of stardust, right? But that's just our lowest aspect. There's also a higher aspect that we have, which is the intensity of celestial nur, light. The microcosm reflects the macrocosm in two ways, which are of particular significance for Ibn al-Arabi's teachings, as a hierarchy of existence and as a divine form, a theomorphic entity. A theomorphic entity. The three basic worlds of the macrocosm, the spiritual, imaginal, and corporeal, are represented in man by the spirit, ruh, soul, nafs, and body, jism. Um, Man is a theomorphic entity. What that means is that he has she has the ability to realize his or her divine nature, to transform himself or herself into a reflection of God and be a divine being that way, to realize one's theomorphism. That's the meaning of the word, to become divine. That the spirit should be spiritual and the body corporeal presents no difficulties. But what does it mean to say that the soul pertains to the imaginal world? The human spirit is also God's spirit. The Quran attributes the spirit breathed into Adam to God with the pronouns his and my, right? Ruhihi and ruhi. Hence, this spirit is called the attribute spirit, ruh al-idafi, because it's attributed to God. It's also called, like when you talk about the ruhi, my spirit, it's the ya al-idafi, or ya al-mudaf. A term which suggests its ambiguous status, both divine and human at once. The spirit possesses all the spiritual or angelic attributes, such as luminosity, subtlety, awareness, and oneness. Clay stands at the opposite pole of the existent cosmos, dark, dense, multiple, dispersed. No connection can be established between the one and the many, the luminous and the dark, without an intermediary, which in man's case is the soul, the locus of our individual awareness. The spirit is aware of God, though not of anything less than God. But we, at least before we have refined our own souls, have no awareness of the spirit. Clay is unaware of anything at all. The soul, which develops gradually as a human being grows and matures, becomes aware of the world with which it is put in touch in a never ending process of self discovery and self finding. Ultimately, it may attain to complete harmony with the spirit. So the soul is in between the spirit and the body, which is why the soul is luminous and dark, subtle and dense, one and many. In some human beings, its luminous or ascending tendency dominates, but in others, its dark or descending tendency is what predominates. Here, the Quranic revelation uses the language of guidance and misguidance, prophets and Satans. Without discussing this question, it is easy to see that there must be a vast hierarchy of souls, ranging from the most spirit like luminosity to the most clay like darkness. The soul, that is to say, our own self awareness, represents an unlimited possibility for development, whether upward, downward, or sideways. Just as the soul can be spoken about in terms of the single divine and cosmic attributes of light, so also it can be discussed in terms of every name of God. God created Adam upon his own form, means that he placed within man every one of his own attributes, just as he placed all of his attributes within the cosmos. But in the cosmos, they are scattered and dispersed, while in man, they are gathered and concentrated. In the cosmos, the divine names are relatively differentiated, mufassal, while in man, they are relatively concentrated, undifferentiated, mujmal. The growth of the human soul, the process whereby it moves from darkness to light, is also a growth from death to life. Hayat, ignorance to knowledge, ilm, listlessness to desire, irada, weakness to power, qudra, dumbness to speech, kalam, and meanness to generosity, jud, and wrongdoing to justice, qist, or al-adl. In each case, the goal is the actualization of a divine attribute in the form of which man was created, but which remains a relative potentiality as long as man does not achieve it fully. All the states and stations mentioned earlier can be seen as stages in the process of actualizing one or more of the divine names. And then we get on to cosmic dynamics. Okay, I think that's like pretty straightforward, right? So I'll just carry on. And then we'll find someone else to read the next section. In the most, sorry, in most of the previous discussion, the macrocosm and microcosm have been envisaged as relatively static entities. But a little meditation, so we talk about them without thinking about the way they interact with each other, right? But a little meditation upon the human state has been sufficient to remind us that the microcosm hardly stands still. Humans may be made up or may be made of three worlds, but the relationship among the worlds does not remain the same throughout a person's life. People may have been created in the divine form, but there is an immeasurable difference between someone who has brought out the divine knowledge and power which had previously been latent within himself, and someone else who has remained ignorant and weak. And just as the microcosm represents a gradual manifestation of the divine names, so also does the macrocosm. The outstanding feature of the cosmos is its ambiguous status, the fact that it is he, not he. In other terms, the cosmos is imagination. And imagination is that which stands in an intermediary situation between affirmation and denial. About it, one says the cosmos is both this and that, or it's neither this nor that. The universe is neither being, in other words, God, nor nothingness, or it's both. It is being and nothingness. It is al wujud and adam. It's also neither wujud and adam. It is existence in the way this term has been defined. This description of the cosmos is basically static and non-temporal. What happens when we take time into consideration? Another dimension of ambiguity is added. In other words, if we take an existent thing at any moment, at any moment in time, without reference to past or future, and try to define its situation, we will come up with a hazy sort of definition, a not very successful attempt to pinpoint its situation between being and nothingness, and in relation to the divine names. But if we look at that thing in the next moment in time, the ambiguity has increased since the situation has changed. Relationships have altered, and we need a new definition in order to take the changes into account. Just as no two things in the cosmos considered synchronistically are exactly the same, since each fits into its own particular niche on each of the cosmic hierarchies that are defined by luminosity, knowledge, power, and the other divine attributes. So also no single thing considered temporally is exactly the same in two successive moments. I mean, this has like a very Buddhist taste to it, right? The idea of nothingness, the idea of, sorry, emptiness, the idea of being empty, right? Existent things do not possess true substances because each thing is defined in relation to another thing in space, and each thing is defined in relation to two moments in time, what came before it and what came after it. Because I'm always stuck in between 2 points in time, before and after, and I come in relation to other objects, uh, my definition depends upon knowing what those other objects are. So what makes me me, right? And is there such a thing as me when all I am is the product of two relationships, right? Two spatial relationships and two temporal relationships, right? So this is Ibn al-Arabi's well-known doctrine of the renewal of creation at each instant, تجديد الخلق في الآنات, a term derived from such Quranic verses as "No, indeed, but they are in confusion as to a new creation في خلق أو في خلق جديد." Um, in case you guys don't, if there's anyone here who doesn't know this idea, it's the fact that no thing can remain in existence for one moment in time by itself, because it needs the power of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to keep it in wujud. So Allah makes it. And what happens is the next moment it disappears, and then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has to recreate it again. But once He recreates it, it's a new thing. But this happens so fast your eyes don't see it. Only the Arifin see it happening, right? So like the pencil that's on my desk now, in the next second it's a new pencil, but you don't see it. And then the next second after that, it's also a new pencil, and so on and so forth. It's never the same pencil, and it's just, you're getting, even though it looks like it's the same pencil, with each passing second, it's always a new pencil. And the same goes for every other thing. This is the khalq al-jadid. So all things change constantly because none of them is the essence of God, which alone is absolutely changeless and eternal. Certain angelic or other creatures may survive for countless eons and from our point of view appear to be eternal, but in the end, everything is annihilated except his face. Kullu shay'in halikun, right? Except for his face. Compared to eternity, the longest duration imaginable is but the blink of an eye. Moreover, no angel remains fixed in its place. Angels have wings, two, three, and four, according to the Quran, so they flap them. Every flap takes them to a new situation. Galaxies may last from one big bang to the next, or the universe may exist steadily and quote unquote forever. But one glance allows us to understand that physical reality is constantly changing, slowly or quickly. If we need the tools of modern physics, we can employ them to convince ourselves that solidity, solidity and permanence are but illusions. When the veil is lifted, says the Quran, you will see the mountains that you suppose to be fixed passing by like clouds. All things change constantly because each day he is upon a task. God's tasks, shu'un, says Ibn al-Arabi, are the creatures. So his the creations that Allah makes, that's his shu'un. Those are his tasks at each moment. And his day, yom, is the indivisible moment. And it means it's the smallest unit of time, smaller than a second, smaller than a millisecond, smaller than a nanosecond. Whatever is the smallest unit of time, that's his day. That's Allah's yom. Each instant, God's relationship to every existent thing in the cosmos changes. Since each instant, he undertakes a new task. To employ another of Ibn al-Arabi's favorite expressions, self-disclosure never repeats itself. لا تكرار في التجلي. In the traditional Islamic world, brides were kept veiled from their husbands until the wedding night. Then came jalwa, the removal of the bride's veil. From the same root, we have the word tajalli, self-disclosure, or God's unveiling himself to the creatures, the way a bride unveils herself to her husband. The cosmos made upon God's form is his unveiling, and he never repeats the manner in which he shows his face, for he is infinite and unconstricted. The divine vastness, al-tawassa'u al-Allahi, forbids repetition. The evanescent and changing nature of existence, or the cosmos, as ever renewed creation and never repeated divine disclosure, is evoked by one of Ibn Arabi's best known names for the substance of the universe, the breath of the All-Merciful, Nafas al-Rahman. God breathes out, and while breathing, he speaks, but only his speech is eternal, not his spoken words as words. Every word appears for an instant only to disappear from the created cosmos forever, though it remains immutably present in his knowledge. Every part of every existent thing is a letter, harf, of God. So every object in the universe is God's word. The creatures are words, kalima, spelled out by the letters. The trajectory of a creature's existence is a sentence, jumla, and each world is a book, a kitab. So the world of bodies is the kitab of bodies. Kitab is jism. And then the world of spirits is kitab al-arwah, for example. And obviously, the world of imagination is kitab al-khayal. All the words and all the books are uttered by the All-Merciful, for God embraces all things in mercy and knowledge. That's from the Quran. Through knowledge, he knows all things, both in their non-existent state as immutable entities and in their existent state as things in the cosmos. Through mercy, he has pity on the non-existent things by answering their prayers to be given existence. For possibility in can is a prayer, a call to the necessary being, who at every instant recreates the cosmos in a new form as the sun throws out fresh light. So he's talking in mythological language. The time before we were created, we used to exist in the state of possibility, like we might be created or we might not be created. But when we were in that state, there was a demand from us to be created. So Allah had mercy on us and created us for our own sake. And in the same way that the sun's generosity just gives out light just because it is the sun, right? His infinite mercy, identified by Ibn al-Arabi's followers explicitly with being itself, answers every prayer for existence. When considering the transformations and transmutations undergone by the cosmos at each instant, it is well to remember that from a certain point of view, the direction of the movement is away from the center, just as light shines out only to dissipate itself in indefinite distance, and words are uttered only to dissolve into space. If you conceive of the cosmos as a circle on a diagram, the center is pure light and pure being in God, and the circumference is complete dispersion, complete multiplicity, complete darkness, right? And complete non-existence. And then you've got what's in between, with varying degrees of existence and varying degrees of darkness and varying degrees of luminosity. It is true that everything returns to God. This is a Quranic leitmotif and a principle of Islamic belief, but the mode of return is different from the mode of appearance. As Ibn al-Arabi points out, the corporeal universe continues moving down and away from its spiritual root. Nevertheless, things disappear only to be taken back to God. The return takes place in a dimension of reality different from that of the origination. Ibn al-Arabi declares that everything which disappears from manifestation goes back to non-manifestation from whence it arose. Non-manifestation is our home. It's where we came from. So that's where we'll go back to. Every death is a birth into another world. Every disappearance, an appearance somewhere else. But the overall, so we can only go from one world to another. But the overall movement never reverses itself, since the cosmic roads know only one-way traffic. To return to there, which is where we came from here, we have to take a different route than the one by which we came. Okay, can I get someone to read this section, please? The return to God.
I can read.
Okay, thank you very much. Bismillah.
Bismillah. All things return to God, but most of them go back in roughly the same form in which they came. Speaking for the angels, Gabriel is quoted as saying, "None of us there is, but has a none of us there is, but has a known station." Ibn Arabi remarks that his words apply in fact to every kind of creature except two, human beings and jinn. A pear tree enters this world as a pear tree and never leaves as a pumpkin. A rhinoceros does not become a monkey or a mouse. Only human beings, leaving jinn out of the picture, come into the universe as a tremendous potentiality for growth and maturation, but also for deviation, degradation, and deformation. Outwardly, they remain human as long as they stay in this world, but inwardly, they may become almost anything at all. They come in as men, but they might live as pumpkins or monkeys or pigs. On the one hand, human beings return to God by the same invisible route followed by other creatures. They are born, they live, they die, and they are gone, no one knows where. The same thing happens to a bee or an oak tree. This is what Ibn Arabi and other called the compulsory return, ruju ittirari, to God. Whether we like it or not, we will travel that route. Oh man, you are laboring toward your Lord laboriously, and you shall encounter him. On the other hand, human beings possess certain gifts which allow them to choose their own route of return. This is the voluntary return, ruju ikhtiyari. Man can follow the path laid down by this prophet or that, or he can follow his own caprice, hawa, and whims. Hawa isn't also air.
Yes, it is. And it's very much connected to caprice.
Oh, that's interesting. Each way takes him back to God, but God has many faces, not all of them pleasant to meet. With
I need to interrupt one thing. In Hawa, it's different spelling here.
Yeah, it's different spelling. Thank you, but because they sound so similar, they're often associated with each other. But yeah, thank you. Like it's a different how, right?
Whithersoever you turn, there is the face of God, whether in this world or the next. If we want to know what these faces are like, we can get a rough idea but by meditating upon the divine roots of all things, God's names. He is full of mercy, Rahma, but he is not above showing his wrath, Gadab. He is the forgiver, Al Ghafur, and the blessing giver, Al Munnim. But he is also the avenger, Al Muntakim, and the terrible in punishment, Shadid Al Ikab. Each of these names represent a face of God, and no one can think that the properties, Akam, of each name are the same. Paradise, says Ibn Arabi, is the locus of manifestation for God's mercy, while hell is the locus of manifestation for his wrath. What will decide the divine face to which a person returns? This is one of the most complex of all issues, not least because it immediately moves us into the realm of free will and predestination, one of the most puzzling of all questions that arise when the divine things, al ilahiyat, are discussed. The brief answer to the question, are we free or are we predestined, is yes and no, and it remains to sort out, thank you, the different perspectives from which our ambiguous situation can be understood. For the present, we will look only at the freedom that sets human beings apart from other creatures and allows them to choose their route of return to the divine reality. Later, Ibn Arabi will be quoted on the subtleties of various divine relationships which counterbalance the appearance of freedom. But we need to begin with the fact that human beings experience themselves as free agents and that their freedom is sufficiently real in the divine scheme of things for God to have sent thousands of messengers warning human beings to make proper use of it. The divine root of human freedom and of the fact that we choose the route by which we return to God is the fact that God created man upon his own form. In its primordial nature, fitra, every human microcosm is the outward form, surah, of an inward meaning, mana, that is named Allah. Allah, the all comprehensive name, denotes not only the essence of God, but also the sum total of every attribute that the essence assumes in relationship to the creatures. However, human beings do not enter the world as full-fledged divine forms. They start out as sort of infinite potentiality for actualizing the all-comprehensive name. At the beginning, they are only empty shells, the dimmest of apparitions dancing on the forest of walls. Between the apparition and the absolute light stands a yawning chasm, an endless void. True, the apparition in relation to absolute darkness is light, but in effect it is shadow. To connect the apparition to the light which it manifests is the human task. This involves a process through which light is intensified and darkness overcome. The dim apparition remains on the wall for all to see. The body remains a fixed reality until death, but the human consciousness travels in the direction of light. Different people make different choices. Some prefer to play with apparitions, some seek out various degrees of light, some turn their gaze to the absolute light and can be satisfied with nothing less. The degrees of light's intensity are practically limitless. Every degree can become a person's way station, manzil, but a way station exists only for the traveler to move on to the next. The journey goes on forever. How can the finite encompass the infinite? All paths do not lead in the direction of absolute light. A person may continue to wander in apparitions in this world and the next, or become transfixed by one of the innumerable barzakh or interworlds that fill the chasm. Here we meet the imponderables of human destiny. Few are the human beings who have witnessed the interworlds with the clarity and perspicacity of Ibn Arabi's and return to map them out. When human beings return to God, whether by compulsion or their own free choice, they go by way of the intermediate worlds. The general characteristics of these worlds have to be sought out in the divine names which they manifest. The Quran tells us to pray, guide us and on a straight path. Just as this straight path of return can be imagined as an ascent through an ever increasing intensity of light that opens up into the infinite lights of God, so also it can be envisaged in terms of many other divine attributes. To increase in light is to increase in life, knowledge, desire, power, speech, generosity, justice, and so on. This is the process of actualizing all the divine names that are latent within the primordial human nature by virtue of the divine form.
Thank you so much, Mara. That's brilliant. I don't know if you guys got the same impression as I did, But this is very reminiscent of Plato's cave metaphor, right? If you're in the cave, some people are more fascinated by the shadows, and some people are more attracted to and feel a calling from the outside light, right? Um, if anyone wants to know more about Plato's cave metaphor, let me know at the end of class. It's a pretty excellent metaphor. Okay, so then I'll carry on with assuming the traits of God. Okay, so one of the most common terms that Ibn al-Arabi employs to describe the process whereby man comes to manifest the divine attributes is takhalluq, assuming the traits. The term must be understood in relation to one of its root meanings, as found in the word khuluq, which may be translated as character in a general sense or character trait in a specific sense. Its full connotations cannot be understood without reference to a few of its antecedents in the tradition. In the most important scriptural use of the term, the Quran addresses the Prophet, telling him that he has a khuluqun azim. English translators have rendered the expression as mighty morality, sublime nature, tremendous nature, sublime morals, sublime morality, tremendous character, and so on. These translations show an attempt to bring out the term's moral and ethical connotations on the one hand, and its ontological roots on the other, for it is separated only by pronunciation, not in the way it is written from the term khalaq, because it's kha, lam, and qaf, so it can be written as khalaq or khuluq, creation. So that means there's an intrinsic connection between the two. The creation you're given by God is what determines your khuluq, right? For Ibn al-Arabi, the tremendous character of the Prophet ﷺ has to do not only with the way he dealt with people, but also with the degree to which he had realized the potentialities of his own primordial nature, created upon the form of God. So what was, when Allah made the khalaq, right? The khalaq has the ability to realize the divine form, which is why their khuluq is alim. So their khalaq is alim, which is what makes their khuluq alim, right? Um, this is also alluded to by Sayyid Musa alayhi salam in another verse. هو الذي أعطى كل شيء خلقه ثم هدى, right? And that's also connected to this idea. Qualities such as generosity, justice, kindness, benevolence, piety, patience, gratitude, and every other moral virtue are nothing extraneous or superadded to the human condition. On the contrary, they define the human condition in an ontological sense. Only by actualizing such qualities does one participate in the fullness of existence and so forth the qualities of being. That's one of the motivations for doing good things and improving your character and acquiring the good divine traits, the good divine characteristics. Because when you do that, you experience more being, you participate in wujud more, you enjoy more of what wujud has to offer you. Whereas you limit your own possibilities when you become attached to the opposite qualities. Just as a person's character is referred to by the term khuluq, so also each of his moral traits, whether good or bad, is called by the same term. The words plural, akhlaq, may be translated as moral traits, though in a philosophical context it is usually rendered as ethics. A few of the hadiths in which this term is employed can suggest some of the connotations it carries in the tradition. The Prophet ﷺ was asked which part of faith is most excellent. He replied, a beautiful character. The most perfect of the faithful in faith is the most beautiful of them in character. So the best thing in the scale, the mizan on the day of judgment, will be a beautiful character. Every religion has its moral character, and the moral character of Islam is modesty al-hayya. The Prophet ﷺ used to command people to observe the noble character traits, the makarim al-akhlaq, which I'm going to talk about myself, if not next week, the week after. I was sent as a prophet, as a way of envisioning other religions. I was sent as a prophet to complete the beautiful character traits, husn al-akhlaq. And among the best of you is the most beautiful in character traits. So this is like a major part of religion. It is not difficult to see the connection between good character traits and the divine names. Note, first of all, that the adjective beautiful employed in many of these hadiths is the same as that which is applied to the most beautiful names. Al-Asma al-Husna, because Husn in Arabic means beauty, beautiful, especially in like pre-Islamic poetry. Many moral traits are also divine attributes, such as repentance, corresponds to the name of Tawab, having faith, which corresponds to Al-Mu'min, generosity, which goes back to the divine name Al-Karim, justice Al-Adil, Al-Muqsit, forgiveness Al-Ghaffar, Al-Ghafoor, uh, pardoning Al-Afu, patience Al-Sabur, gratitude Al-Shakur, forbearance Al-Halim, wisdom Al-Hakim, love Al-Wadud, being dutiful Al-Barr, clemency Al-Ra'uf, um, and I think we said Halim too, right? Uh, Moreover, if the question is asked, what are God's character traits? One can answer only by listing his names. Those are his character traits. For Ibn al-Arabi, the expressions assuming the character traits of God, أتخلق بأخلاق Allah, and assuming the traits of God's names, أتخلق بأسماء Allah, are synonymous and they are identical with the spiritual path of the Sufis. This is what the Sufi path is all about. Okay, and that takes us into theomorphic ethics. So, in Ibn al-Arabi's way of looking at things, human beings assume many of the traits of God to a certain degree and more than any other terrestrial creatures as a matter of course by the fact of living a life in the divine human form. A normal child cannot grow up without manifesting life, knowledge, desire, power, speech, hearing, sight, and other divine names, attributes. Especially significant here is the degree to which humans display the attributes of knowledge or intelligence and speech, since these are fundamental in setting them apart from other creatures. The presence of the qualities just mentioned, leaving aside for a moment the question of the intensity of their manifestation, is the mark of theomorphism, and the sign of being human. But a person who aspires to become more than a human animal will have to actualize other divine qualities, which are likely to remain latent in the natural human state. That is, those traits which have a specifically moral connotation, such as generosity, justice, forbearance, and gratitude. It must always be kept in mind that Sufi ethics, Ibn al-Arabi's in particular, is grounded in ontology, which means it corresponds to reality. It's not just something that we make up. It corresponds to the way things actually are. Al-amr fi nafsi. In other words, noble character traits are not just extraneous qualities that we might acquire if we aspire to become good human beings, but which have no real bearing upon our mode of existence. No, on the contrary, they define our mode of existence since they determine the extent to which we participate in the fullness of the light of being. They determine how much we know about reality. So there's a connection. And the more you acquire the bad character traits, the less you know about reality. It is easy to conceive of existence as light and to understand that a more intense light is a more intense existence and that absolute light is sheer being. But one must also understand every divine attribute and moral trait as a mode, or color, if you like, of light. Absolute being is sheer generosity. To gain proximity to being by increasing the intensity of one's existence is to become more generous by the very nature of things. So, greed, impatience, injustice, cowardice, arrogance, and avarice are not only moral faults but also ontological lacks. They mark the weakness of the reflected light of being in the human individual. So, everyone who has studied traditional ethics knows that one cannot become virtuous and ethical through wishy washy do goodism. A work like Nasir ad-Din Tusi's Nasirian Ethics makes abundantly clear that a key ingredient in the virtuous human soul is equilibrium among the moral traits. And this depends on an intelligent and wise discernment of relationships and aspects, right? Goes back to Aristotle. To be virtuous means to be balanced in the virtue you are seeking to implement. Okay? And we talked about that before. Too much justice without generosity will end up in tyranny. And too much forgiveness without justice will lead to chaos. That's why true virtue and true virtuousness is balance. In ethics and morality, balance is everything. which is what makes prudentia the mother of all virtues for Aristotle. So also is the case, Ibn Arabi would add, in assuming the traits of the divine names, which is what ethics and moralities are all about. It is especially difficult to assume the traits of the names because all the names do not stand on the same level. Hence, some must be displayed before others, and some must even be avoided until God bestows them on man in accordance with his wisdom. Like Shadid al-Iqab is probably a name you want to avoid until God shows you where to use it. And al-Mutakabbir is also one of God's names. You should definitely avoid that name in general until God shows you where to use it, like exactly, and in a very limited dosage. Whereas like Al-Halim and like Ar-Rahman is an attribute you can employ much more liberally. It is clear that a certain hierarchy exists among the names. For example, God does not do something that's related to power without wanting to desire. So now he's showing you the ranking of the names. He cannot desire to do something without discerning its situation, knowledge, and he cannot have knowledge without existing in the first place. So those are the four mother attributes. Life comes first, knowledge comes second, desire comes third, and power comes fourth. You can't do something without knowing what you want to do, and you can't decide what you want to do without knowing about it first, and you can't know something without first being alive. So life is the greatest attribute. It's the most encompassing attribute. What comes after that? Knowledge. What comes after that? Desired will. What comes after that? Power. So power is actually fourth in that hierarchy. Human attainment to generosity and justice presupposes a certain degree of intelligence and speech. But where this question takes on special importance is in divine names such as the magnificent al-Mutakabbir, overbearing al-Jabbar, overwhelming al-Qahhar, or the conqueror, inaccessible al-Aziz, tremendous al-Azim, and the all-high al-Ali, like the that's also inaccessible. In Ibn al-Arabi's view, the person who actualized these qualities most patently was Fir'aun of the Quran, who said, "Ana rabbukum al-ala," I am your Lord, the Most High. But we do not have to search that far, since most any office, is that what it says? Since most any office has its own would-be pharaoh. Oh, so like any manager in an office would have like a mini pharaoh. Obviously, these divine qualities cannot be displayed in isolation from other qualities, or moral disaster ensues. So the general principle that determines which names should be acquired and which should be avoided derives from the relative ontological status of the names. It can be stated succinctly in terms of the well-known prophetic saying, God's mercy precedes his wrath. This means that mercy always takes priority over wrath within the divine act. The whole of the cosmos is nothing but the breath of the all-merciful. So wrath, then, is an offshoot of mercy in relation to certain creatures. What that means is that rahma is the asl, and al-intiqam, for example, is the fara'. But the root of all things is rahma, which is the root, whereas taking revenge or wrath, al-ghadab, is an accident. It's an arad. It's not what is essential. However, it may take eons before those creatures realized that the wrath they had been tasting in the concrete form of infernal punishment was in fact mercy. So he's talking about Ahl Jahannam. From the human perspective, there is a real and fundamental difference between mercy and wrath, even if in the divine overview, wrath derives from and leads back to mercy. So, wrath al-ghadab is actually a part of rahmah. So that means any kind of ghadab you see can only lead back to rahmah in some way. That is its purpose. The person who tries to make ghadab and rahmah equal to each other is ignorant. Ghadab is subservient to rahmah, and rahmah is the source, whereas ghadab is only used to serve a specific purpose that takes one back to rahmah. So ghadab cannot be everlasting. Rahmah is what is everlasting. So from the human perspective, there's a real and fundamental difference between mercy and wrath. Even if in the divine overview, Wrath derives from and leads back to mercy. In short, mercy pertains to the very nature of being itself. So it encompasses all things. Like God doesn't say, my wrath encompasses all things. He says, my mercy encompasses all things. But wrath is a subsidiary attribute of being assumed in relation to specific existence for precise and determined reasons. A similar analysis can be made of many corresponding pairs of divine attributes such as forgiveness and vengeance. Several sets of contrary divine names describe the faces of being turned toward the creatures. These attributes can be divided into two broad categories. The names of beauty and the names of majesty. The names of Jamal and the names of Jalal, or the names of gentleness, Lutf, and the names of severity, Qahr. The creative properties of these two sets of attributes provide a significant parallel with the two fundamental perspectives on the divine being discussed earlier: incomparability, which is tanzih, and similarity, which is tashbih. Inasmuch as God is incomparable with all created things, he can only be understood in terms of the attributes denoting his distance, transcendence, and difference. In this respect, human beings sense the majesty and tremendousness of God and perceive him as magnificent, overbearing, overwhelming, inaccessible, all high, great, like Kabir, Azim, Slayer, and King. These attributes demand that all created things be infinitely far from him. The things are totally not he. This is Tanzih. He is being and they are non existence. He is everything and you are nothing. That's Tanzih. To the extent any relationship can be envisaged between the creator and his creature, he is a stern and distant father, though Islam avoids this particular analogy because of its Christian connections. The human situation in this respect is total slavehood or servanthood. I think I'm gonna try and stop at some point. So, oh, this goes on. Okay, well, I'll see where I'll stop. Okay. So the human situation in this respect is total slavehood or servanthood or ubudiyya. God is self-sufficient and independent, al-ghani, while man is utterly poor, al-faqir, toward him. Man cannot aspire to assume the divine traits of majesty or even to gain proximity to them, since they mark the difference between God and creation, between being and non-existence. To claim such attributes for oneself is in effect to claim divinity, an unforgivable sin. When God's similarity with the creatures is affirmed, the situation appears in a different light. In respect of his similarity, God is seen as immanent and near. He appears in the guise of gentleness, mercy, beauty, generosity, love, forgiveness, pardon, bestowal, like giving, and beneficence. Because he possesses these attributes, the existence of every individual creature is a matter of his immediate concern. In this respect, one might say that she, God with a capital S, she is a compassionate mother who never fails to look out for the welfare of her children. You will come to this in Fasl Muhammad, if we ever come to Fasl Muhammad, if we live long enough, where he talks about how the divine essence in Arabic, that is mu'annith, it's female. The word his sifat is mu'annith, right? His that is mu'annith, his sifat is mu'annith, his power, qudra, is mu'annith, his rahmah is mu'annith, goes back to raham, the womb. Pretty much the majority of the things we talk about God is feminine, just to put things into perspective. And that's why Rasulullah, he had a particular love for women and femininity that goes back to its ontological root in reality, which is God Himself, right? And he talks more about that in Fasl Muhammad. The human response to this relationship is love, devotion, and the desire to move nearer to the source of light. It is in this respect that human beings are created upon God's form and can actualize the fullness of their theomorphic nature. If in the first respect, man is God's slave, in the second respect, he may become his vicegerent, Khalifa and friend, Wali, two important technical terms. And the Khalifa is the representative of the one he's representing. He's representing, that is tashbih. He can become like him. But obviously, in the first perspective, the abid means you're nothing like him. Incomparability and the names of majesty are demanded by the fact of God's being and our non existence. But our non existence is somehow woven with existence. The dimmest light is nevertheless light, and the dimmest light is more real than total darkness. Mercy, which is being and light, pervades everything that exists. In contrast, wrath is like the repercussion of nothingness. It is God's answer to a non existent thing, which has been given existence through generosity and compassion, and yet claims a right to exist. Incomparability affirms the reality of being in the face of everything that is not being, but similarity affirms the ultimate identity of all existence with being. Tanzih is to say you don't exist, but tashbih is to say that you do exist. Incomparability, incomparability says not he, la huwa. Similarity says he, who, and he is more real than not he. The attributes of similarity and beauty overcome those of incomparability and majesty in the same way that light erases darkness, mercy overcomes wrath, and nearness negates distance, and so existence overcomes non-existence, which is obviously because it's proven by the fact that we're here, right? But man cannot claim light and nearness for himself. His first task is to be God's servant, to acknowledge his majesty and wrath, and to avoid any attempt to assume as his own those attributes which pertain to incomparability. He must seek out mercy and avoid wrath. It is true that man is a theomorphic entity made upon the form of all the divine names, but there's a right way and a wrong way to assume the divine traits. Once a human being has been infused with the divine mercy and filled with its light, the attributes of majesty appear within him as a matter of course, but they always represent dangers. The sin of Iblis was to perceive that the light within himself was more intense than in Adam, and to say as a result, "Ana khayrun minhu," I am better than him. خلقتني من نار وخلقته من طين. You made me a fire, and you made him out of clay. So I'm better than him. As a result, he claimed a greatness which did not, in fact, belong to him. Or, as Ibn al Arabi might say, he came to manifest. So, Iblis came to manifest the divine name magnificent, which is what word did we say that was? Magnificent is al mutakabbir, I think.
المتكبر.
Yeah, thank you. Mutakabbir, outside of its proper limits, within the created world. He claimed incomparability for himself, and as a result, came face to face with the divine wrath. The only thing a person can ever claim for himself is non existence, which in religious terms is to be God's servant. Indeed, Ibn al Arabi places servanthood at the highest level of human realization. After all, it was through his servanthood, through his ubudiyyah, that Muhammad was worthy to be called God's messenger. Abduhu wa rasuluh. Total obliteration before the divine incomparability results in a full manifestation of the divine similarity. Not he is simultaneously he. The priority of mercy over wrath can also be explained in terms of the precedence of unity over multiplicity. God in himself is one being, while existence appears as an indefinite multiplicity of things. Now, let me see how far this actually goes. Guys, are you okay to finish like 1.5 pages, or do you want to stop?
It's okay, we can carry on if you want.
Okay to finish.
I really like your stamina, guys. More power to you. Okay. The divine names stand as a kind of barzakh between oneness and manyness. Please pass on some of that energy to me. There is but a single being, yet the names represent a multiplicity of faces that being assumes in relation to the created things. Right? There's just one being, but it is a multiplicity of faces and relationships. In the same way that like Faris can be Faris the father, Faris the son, Faris the nephew, Faris the grandson, Faris the grandfather, inshallah one day. Those are a multiplicity of relationships, but it's just one being. Same with God. The essence itself, or being, considered without the names, like Ar-Rahman, Al-Shadid, Al-Iqab, Al-Rafi, Al-Mudhil. So considered without the names is what Ibn Arabi sometimes calls the unity of the one ahadiyyat al-ahad, right? This is the ahadiyya. In contrast to being considered as possessor of the names, which is the unity manus, which is the hadith al-kathra. God, as such, taking both perspectives into account, is then the one many, al-wahid al-kathir. Here, oneness precedes manyness, since without being, the many things cannot exist. In the same way, light precedes the colors, and mercy precedes wrath. From the perspective of unity and multiplicity, the divine presence appears as a circle whose center is the essence, and whose full deployment is the acts and their multiple degrees and kinds. The concentric circles surrounding the center represent the ontological levels, each successive circle being dimmer and weaker than the preceding circle. So it's like if you imagine like a ripple in a pool of water. Like if you think of that image, a drop falls into a pool of water and the ripples spread out. And as the ripples go outward, the ripples weaken. And the farther the ripple, the weaker it is. And so if the center of the circle is God, the more you move away from the center, the weaker the thing is. So if you draw these concentric circles from the point of origin going outward and outward and outward, those circles become dimmer and dimmer and weaker as it moves further away from what? Its source. Here, the divine names are the relationships that the center assumes in respect to any place on the circle. Each place can be assigned coordinates in terms of its distance from the creator, from the creator and the center, i.e., its degree on the ontological hierarchy, and its relationship with other points situated on the same concentric circle, i.e., its relationship with things in its own world. But the situation is made incredibly complex because of the nature of the center, which can be viewed in respect of any ontological attribute, any name of God. So if you draw a circle on a diagram, you can put any divine name in the center. So the center is not only being, it is also absolute life, absolute knowledge, absolute desire, absolute power, and so on. The center is one, yet it assumes a relationship with each location on the circle in terms of each attribute. So desire has one effect upon each specific point, while power has another effect. By the same token, each point is both passive in relation to the activity of the attribute, and to the extent that it is colored by the attribute and displays it as its own, active toward other points on the circle. So what makes that complex is like, yeah, you could say like a major angel whose job is to like distribute, let's say, I don't know, rain or food, is active towards us, right? Where you say that the sun, like we view the sun as a giver, right? The sun's job is to give light to us, right? So the sun is active, the angels doing their duties are active, but they're also passive in relation to something else. The sun is passive and receptive to something beyond it. Maybe like a spiritual sun, who knows? And the angels are passive and receptive to something above them. So when light shines upon the moon illuminates the night sky. When any attribute of being displays its properties within a given existence, those properties are reflected in the direction of other existent things in an indefinite concatenation of relationships. I will need to look up this word. I was not expecting to see it. When any attribute of being displays its properties within a given existence, those properties are reflected in the direction of other existent things. I think like I think that means like to disperse, but if someone could just look that up for me, and we'll come back to it. Okay.
It's about interconnectedness and like so in an indefinite concatenation of relationships is like it's like kind of looking at it like a web, And so all of the
Yeah.
points and all of the nodes of the web are kind of like connected to each other in like complex ways. If you look at it from the perspective of like some problems and stuff, like certain problems are called wicked problems because every aspect of each problem is linked to like other very big problems and stuff. And so no one thing can be solved very easily. Like, for example, if you look
Yeah,
at corruption or if you look at, you know, anything like that in the world.
absolutely, ma'am. And that is a fantastic description. Web, exactly. It's a web of relationships. Thank you so much for that word, by the way. Jazakallah khairan. That was beautiful. Okay, so this cosmos of interrelating points, each reflecting the center in its own unique fashion, is by no means static. All sorts of movements can be discerned on any given concentric circle or between the very circles, the ultimate significance of which can only be judged in terms of the changing relationship with the center. But this much is relatively clear. The precedent attributes of God display their properties ever more clearly as one moves toward the center, while the secondary and subsidiary attributes become stronger as one moves towards the periphery. Where is mercy? With being, light, knowledge, unity. Where is wrath? With non existence, darkness, ignorance, multiplicity, dispersion. That's a really good point, mashallah. The dispersive movement toward the periphery, the circumference, is a positive creative force. Without it, light would not shine and the cosmos would not come into existence. The divine attributes manifest themselves in an undifferentiated mode, mujmal, at the level of the intense light of the angels, and in a boundlessly differentiated mode, tafsil, at the level of the sensory cosmos in its full spatial and temporal extension. So it's undifferentiated in the center, and it is completely differentiated and dispersed at the edges of the circle at the circumference. But once this full outward manifestation is achieved, it is time for the unitive movement to take over. And an active and conscious participation in this movement is the exclusive prerogative of human beings because they can return back to the center but by a different road. Man enters into the corporeal world where the differentiated attributes of being begin their reintegration into an all comprehensive unity since he is created upon the divine form even as an infant. The attribute which rules over the return, and of course, Dr. Omar Farooq Abdullah says that children are awliya already. The attribute which rules over the return to the center is guidance, hidayah, while the dispersive movement within the human sphere that prevents and precludes the return toward the center is called misguidance, idlal. The unitive movement finds its fullest expression in the prophets and the friends of God, who are the loci of self-disclosure for the divine name, the guide, Al-Hadi. So the prophets are the manifestation of Al-Hadi. The dispersive movement finds its greatest representatives in Satan and his friends, Awliya Shaitan, who manifest the divine name, misguided, Al-Mudil. Misguidance is closely allied to wrath, and therefore must be considered a branch of mercy and guidance, but the positive effects of the attribute in the long run, taking perhaps innumerable eons, cannot obviate the negative effects in the relatively short run, effects which the Quran refers to as punishment, chastisement, and the pain of the burning. The prophets present guidance to mankind in the form of the divine messages, which frequently appear as scriptures. In order to achieve full humanity, people must move toward the mercy, light, and unity which stand at the center of the circle of existence. Guidance is the only door which leads in that direction. If human beings ignore the message of the prophets, they will fall into one of the innumerable paths laid down by the Satans, all of whom manifest misguidance. Hence, they'll remain in dispersion and come under the sway of the divine wrath. Though mercy precedes wrath and manifests itself even in the midst of wrath, there is a more specific kind of mercy which leads to happiness and felicity immediately after death and at the resurrection, and which can only be actualized through putting oneself into harmony and to harmony with guidance. Hence, Ibn Arabi distinguishes between the mercy of free gift and the mercy of obligation. So I think it's called so this is rahmatul imtinan, that's the free gift, And then there's rahmatul wujub, which is the mercy of obligation. So God gives the first to all creatures without distinction. That's the mercy of free gift. That's his gift to all creation, which is wujud. While he has obliged himself to confer the second only on the God-fearing. Both mercies are referred to in the Quranic verse, my mercy of free gift embraces all things, but I shall prescribe it in specific instances for those who are God-fearing, muttaqun, and pay the alms, they pay the zakat, and those who indeed have faith in our signs, those who follow the messenger. The first mercy manifests itself even in chastisement and infernal wretchedness, while the second displays itself only as felicity. So we'll just stop there. And we can definitely finish it next time, I believe, because it's only like a few pages left, inshallah. Yeah, and then that's it. And then we can actually get started with the book properly. Okay, so let's just stop sharing. Thank you very much, guys, for putting up with me. Now, okay, so we have a few questions here. Okay, does anyone want to raise their hands for a question before I take the ones in the chat?
I can't find the handy hand button again. There was that you said about there's a paragraph about the dispersive movement toward the periphery is a positive creative force section. Yeah. And I was thinking, is that similar to the divine breath out, in and out breath, possibly? Because it's expanding. Once this full outward manifestation is achieved, it is time for the unitive movement to take over. And
you know, that's what it sounds like to me as well. I'm not 100% sure. I mean, even for me, like the way Chittick wrote that, like that was like quite dense. I'd have to go back and reread it again to like actually, like fully grasp it. But that's what it sounds like to me as well, because creation is moving outwards, and the breathing out of the breath of the All Merciful is creation. So I would agree with you.
And it's also like those and it can also be then in that moment of the instant recreation of everything.
Yes.
Be the same process as well, couldn't it?
Yes, absolutely. Maham, and then I'll take Said Bukhari's questions in the chat.
So I wanted to ask, there in the start of when we were reading, it said that the things that are in non-existence pray towards the mercy of Allah so that He may bring them into existence through His mercy. And so I was wondering, for those of us who are like hoping to actualize certain potential in ourselves, would Ar-Rahman be the best name to invoke for that then?
And as I keep telling people, I'm not a spiritual doctor. I do not know. I could check out a couple of books for you, but really, you're asking for spiritual medicine in terms of like getting something done. So a sheikh will prescribe that. Yeah, that's a good question. No, it would be different names like Latif, Ya Latif, Ya Latif, Ya Latif. Al Latif is like the most well-known one.
Right. Okay.
But there are actual names you can do as dhikr. But it's like it's like a doctor. You go to a doctor, to a sheikh, to get a specific dosage and recommendation. Like I can't give it, but yeah, there are names that can do that. Actually, Maham, what you're talking about is good. There is a divine name that can do that. Yes, but I personally don't know what it is.
All right, thank you.
Sidi Said Bukhari. Let's work backwards. How is wrath understood as negative, nothingness, blackness, etc.? I like the tangent that faith is akhlaq. Yes, faith is akhlaq. How is wrath understood as well, yeah. Okay. Well, because wrath is a secondary attribute. So the secondary attributes tend to go outwards, whereas the primary attributes tend to pull you inwards. But it's not, I know like this can be conceptualized in different ways, but just speaking very simply, like rahma and these kinds of attributes in life will pull you inwards, where, I mean, but you can also say life goes outwards as well. Otherwise, there wouldn't be creation. But wrath is an attribute that tends towards differentiation and disconnection. I would say it goes towards disconnection and disunity. Whereas, like, for example, rahma and let's say halim, ghafur, and afu are attributes that tend more towards unity and bringing together, right? Okay, let's see. Concatenation reminds me of Emerson's quote about a subtle chain of countless rings. The next onto the farthest rings, mashallah, Pedro. That's beautiful. That's actually what kind of like what Ibn Arabi's talking about. That's a really good quote. Like, I want to try and save that actually. Given the ontology of Ibn Arabi, how can difference between human being and animals, Sidi, say Bukhari, how can we tell the difference, you mean?
Yes, for example, when the analogy was given, like when the moon shines upon, let's say, about any object, so
Yeah.
it is get realized. So, for example, that implies that the only reality is the reality of God, right? But
Yes.
for example, God is the reality, and then on the periphery, we see the humans, the animals. But my question seems to be like that, for example, the moonlight shines over the objects. So objects get to realize whatever their potentials are. But for example, being human, my question would be that how would I get to know that I am a human being, indifferent from the animal and from the plant? So from a human perspective, I'm asking this question rather than from.
It's our ability to be theomorphic.
It's our ability to feel what?
To be theomorphic.
Okay.
To realize our ability to manifest the divine attributes. And then the professor also says, like, our ability to manifest knowledge and speech tends to set us apart from the animals. Our ability to become very intelligent and perceptive and manifest speech, articulation, tends to set us apart from the animals, but really it's our theomorphism. Our theomorphism. Man, how do you pronounce that? Anyways, our ability to manifest the divine attributes in a complete and harmonious sense, because animals cannot manifest all the names, but humans are the only ones who can manifest all the divine names, especially in harmony. So if a human being manifests all the names in harmony, that will definitely set him or her apart from the animals. But the animals and plants and minerals, they can only manifest certain names. They cannot manifest all the names. And that's impossible for them.
And what do you mean by harmony? In harmony, humans can manifest all the names in harmony means?
Yeah. So in balance. So for example, Fir'aun manifested the name Al-Mutakabbir and Al-Jabbar not with harmony. So it means he manifested Jabbar out of balance and much, much more than other names. So he only developed the part of him that was Jabbar, and the other part that was Latif, and which has Rahma, was underdeveloped. So it would be like your own body, like, I don't know, like maybe one arm develops normally and the other arm is like dwarfed. It's short, for example. So that's not a harmonious development, right? So how can your body function properly? Or your heart, let's say like your lungs develop better than your heart, for example. The body cannot function properly if all the parts don't develop in the proportion that they're supposed to develop in. It's the same with the spiritual body. If Fir'aun only manifests being Jabbar and not the other attributes, he's completely out of balance. And can you please explain that God has created human beings on his image in detail at the end? Okay, so it's to do with the fact that there's a hadith that where Rasulullah says that خَلَقَ اللَّهُ آدَمَ عَلَى صُورَتِهِ. So this is explicitly in the hadith, and there's a second narration which says عَلَى صُورَةِ الرَّحْمَنِ, to take away to take away the ambiguity. We are made upon God's form because we manifest the divine names. So we have the potential to manifest all the names. That's God's form. His form are all the asma ilahiyya. That's his form. That's his surah. And so we are made upon that form. No one else was.
Okay, but I was just wondering, I mean, for example, when we say that we have been created upon God's form, what do we want to signify? I mean, does that reflect the wisdom that human beings carry, or the potentiality to express God's name, or what is it that makes us the expression of God's surah? خلق الله على صورته, but what is the surah of God? I mean, خلق الله آدم على صورته. So, for example, if I ask this
the
question,
surah of God is the Hadith Qudsi, that when I love a servant, right, and he performs the fara'id, the obligations I've imposed upon him, right, and then he continues to perform what are called the nawafil, the supererogatory acts of devotion, and he keeps doing that until I love him. And when I love him, I am his hearing with which he hears, and his sight with which he sees, and his hand with which he grasps, and his feet with which he walks. This unification between him and God, not literal unification, right? But this unification between him and God, that is it. That's it. This abid who realizes his nothingness, literally la shay, his la shay'iyya, his nothingness, when he realizes that, when he manifests that, like, I am nothing and God, you're everything, he becomes the empty cup with which God can fill. And when he empties his heart of the dunya, then God can fill it, right? So then the heart of the believer embraces God. So God takes a seat, residence in the heart, then acts through him. That is the divine form. That's it. Which the prophets have realized and the major saints have realized.
so realizing one's nothingness is
the goal of existence. Cool. Any other questions?
I think Sayyid was meaning like what is the surah in the basics, like when he created man on his surah is like his image, no?
Yeah, correct. Yes.
So what is the image in the beginning to create based on it?
Wait, I'm not sure I got the question. What was the surah in the beginning?
Yeah, like, you know what, I want to create, let's say, which is similarity here. No?
Sorry, I don't know how to raise my hand either. But I had kind of just a comment thought here. In another group, we were talking about how like there's some kind of anthropomorphism you can argue in broad of like God's shin and his hand and his face, and things like that. And there's debate about these kind of things, of course too. But what we were talking about in the group is how like the hand is very important to like human cognition and thinking, right? Because it's like how we give, right? So that's what it means with respect to like God, for example, in a very simple sense, right? That's God's hand is how he gives and takes, right? And his face is similar to our face, right? It's how we're first perceived or something like that. So maybe that's kind of tied to I think there's two different hadiths that are being mentioned here as well. So maybe that's part of the the confusion or problem. Thank you.
Yeah.
And also,
wait a minute. So sorry, just 1 second. Okay. Wait, Ghada, can I just go back to you for 1 second? So by surah, are you thinking of like a picture? And yeah, it's with a sod. But are you thinking of like picture when I say surah?
I think like when you say خلق الله مثلا خلقنا على صورته, which is surah, it's image, no? If you want to translate it.
Okay. So that's where the confusion is. Okay, great question. Okay.
Here
Surah.
it goes for تشبيه and تنزيه, and then.
Okay, so let me get into it. Surah in normal Arabic is a picture. It's a picture. That's not what surah is in the hadith. Surah in the hadith is form. It's form. It's not like a picture.
So
It's
it goes to
forms.
the world of imagination.
It doesn't go to imagination. It's like we talked about this like I think sometime back in the same book. There's something called surah and there's something called ma'na. The surah is what contains the ma'na, right? Now, yes, if we talk about a dream and we say like when Rasulullah saw Laban and Halib, he saw Laban in a dream, the surah was Laban, so it is a picture, yes, in a dream. And the ma'na was knowledge. So when he was drinking a Laban, he was drinking knowledge. He was gaining knowledge, right? So there is no ma'na that can be expressed without a surah. But when it comes to this particular hadith, God doesn't have a like an actual physical image, right? But the human being is like a metaphor for him. The human being is a metaphor for him. So metaphorically, like, yes, the way we have two hands because God has two hands, right? But what God's two hands are, it's not physical, it's not anthropomorphic. I think we talked about this also in the other class. They are hands that we don't know what they are, right? So nu'min bila kayf. We believe that God has two hands, but we don't know what they are. We don't know how he has these two hands, right? So when we say that Adam was made upon the form of Allah, what we're saying is Allah هو اسم الجامع. اسم الجامع. وهو الاسم الذي يشمل كل الأسماء. God is the name that encompasses all the names. Like Ar-Rahman does not, well, Ar-Rahman does encompass Shadid al-Iqab, but for example, Al-Muntaqim does not encompass Ar-Rahman necessarily. And Al-Mudhil does not encompass let's say Al-Rafi', for example, right? And so on and so forth. So certain names are contraries, they don't include one another. Only al-ism al-jama', which is Allah, Allah includes all the names, all of them, right? So when we say that Adam was made upon that surah, the ma'ana, the meaning of that is that Adam can express all the names. That's what it means.
Thank you.
It's also the same with Ar-Rahman. Ar-Rahman also encompasses all the names. So when he's made upon the form of Ar-Rahman, he can encompass all the names. Huma?
Yes, Sidi, thank you so much. I think I just wanted to offer maybe a meditation on this unimaginability imaginability, incommensurability of Allah,
Yes.
which is beyond surah. And when we even think of all of
Mm.
these traits and a form for Allah, we are imposing our human limit
Yes.
of imagination onto the creator who is beyond these. And a linguistic example is to say Faris is a man,
Yes.
right? Because man, we are assuming, is a larger category of human beings, and Faris is one amongst them. He has
Yes.
all of those characteristics that men in a general abstract form have. But to say Allah has a surah or Allah
Mm.
is Rahman is in English, in logic, it is a flawed way of saying that, because and so the Arabic way, when in the dua, that when we say Allahumma anta salam,
Mm.
you are peace. Instead of saying Allah has peace, or Allah is kind implies that kindness is something else out there, and Allah has kindness. Whereas He is kindness, He is the generator of kindness. The
Absolutely, yeah.
concept of kindness does not exist without Him. The concept of surah, of form and meaning, do not exist without Him. So to imagine a form for Him is, in that way, it becomes ludicrous, right?
Yeah, that's why we don't do it. But like the question was like, what does this word mean? So we're just explaining like what it
Yeah,
means in the
yeah.
in that technical sense. But yeah, but thank you for the
Technical sense.
meditation.
Yeah.
But yeah,
And the
exactly.
there was another thing that you mentioned, that within each second, each moment when Allah creates everything anew, that gap between them is like a year for Allah, right? That's Allah's year. Did
No.
no? What?
So we use the word yom.
Yom, a day for Him.
But it's not a day. So technically, the word yom means day.
Yeah.
But in Arabic, it can mean any unit of time.
Okay.
So for God, it's the smallest unit of time.
Okay.
So for him, it's shorter than a second, shorter than a millisecond, shorter than a nanosecond.
Yeah.
Whatever this is the smallest unit of time, that's his time.
But
It's
within physics, also, Faris, Sidna,
Yeah.
we cannot actually measure beyond a certain small length of time.
good.
It's
So
theoretically
if
proven to
we
be.
okay,
It's
good.
theoretically proven that we cannot measure below a certain small unit of time because of the limitations of electrons and protons, our the composition of our universe.
Yeah. Okay, so I'd be careful about making comparisons, although by the way, it's really good to do this, right? But just
Yeah.
with a caveat. I'd be careful with comparing modern science to pre-modern metaphysics, because the way they used to think was very different. And modern science only works on one level, which is the physical level. But by the way, what you said is brilliant. So in the past, there was a debate between. It goes back to Plato and Aristotle. Actually, it's like time.
Is time is continuous, or can it be broken up?
Well, is time infinitely divisible or not?
Yeah.
So you're propounding a view. I don't know if it's Plato's or Aristotle's. I forget, but you're propounding that actually it goes to a point where it can't be divided any further, right?
Yeah.
So Ibn Arabi I guess lucky for us, Ibn Arabi shares the same view. So when you get to the smallest unit of time that can't be broken down any further, it's called al-jawhar al-fard. It's called the indivisible unit. That is called al-jawhar al-fard.
Wow. Okay.
So we do have that, yeah, which is good, I guess. But not every discovery of science or physics corresponds to what Ibn Arabi is talking about. But by the way, there's lots of fascinating connections, by the way. The most fascinating connections between modern physics and Ibn Arabi can be found in Muhammad Haj Yusuf's book on time and cosmology.
Time and cosmology.
Yeah,
Thank you so much.
if you ever want to check that out, that's got some fascinating crossovers. Okay, so guys, if there are no more questions, I'll just leave it at that for now. Thank you so much for coming. And any questions, we can take them in the chat, I guess. And yeah, I will see you next time, inshallah. MashaAllah, Omar, that's a brilliant quote. Yes, or sorry, statement. Exactly. Allah yabarak fikum. Thank you. Bye bye. Let's stop
Thank
recording.
you.
Thank you.
Thank you.